Imagine being so hungry that your stomach aches. But when you finally sit down to eat, you notice an elderly couple struggling right in front of you. What would you do? Most people would look away, but one humble waiter gave up his only meal for them. The very next day, a millionaire knocked on his door, and his life was never the same again. Welcome to BrainFuel, the channel where real stories inspire real change. Here, we bring you powerful tales of kindness, struggle, and destiny that remind us all life can turn around in the most unexpected ways. If you believe in hope, in second chances, and in the magic of compassion, hit that subscribe button and fuel your mind with stories that matter. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. It was late in the evening, and the little diner on the corner of Maple Street was almost empty. The clatter of dishes had quieted down. The aroma of grilled food still lingered in the air, and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Marcus, a young black waiter in his early 20s, dragged a chair back and sat down with a sigh. His feet ached from standing all day. His back was sore, and his uniform smelled faintly of grease and coffee. He had been working since sunrise, covering for another waiter who had called in sick, and the day had felt endless. But what bothered him more than the exhaustion was a gnawing pain in his stomach. Marcus hadn't eaten since morning. The diner was busy. Customers kept pouring in, and by the time he had a moment to breathe, the kitchen had closed. Out of pity, the cook had fixed him a simple plate before leaving, some scrambled eggs, toast, and a bit of hash browns. It wasn't much, but for Marcus it was a blessing. He pulled the plate closer, ready to finally have his first bite of the day. Just then, the bell above the diner door chimed. Marcus looked up, startled. The sign on the door clearly said close, but sometimes people wandered in late, hoping for a meal. An elderly couple stepped inside slowly, holding hands. The man wore a faded jacket that was too big for his thin frame, and the woman's dress was worn at the edges, her scarf pulled tightly around her neck to keep warm. They moved carefully, like people who carried the weight of time and hardship in their bones. Marcus immediately noticed how pale they looked, how their eyes seemed tired, yet gentle. The old man cleared his throat and asked softly, "Son, are you still serving food? We're sorry to bother you so late." Marcus hesitated. The kitchen was shut down. There was nothing left except the plate sitting in front of him. His plate, his one meal after an entire day of hunger. For a moment, he looked down at the food, then back at the couple. The woman avoided eye contact, but he saw the way she clutched her husband's arm, as if embarrassed to even be asking. He could tell by their expressions that they weren't just late-night wanderers. They were genuinely hungry. Marcus's heart tugged at him. He remembered the times when he was a boy and his family had gone without food, how his mother used to pretend she wasn't hungry so that her children could eat. That memory never left him. He swallowed hard, pushed the plate toward the couple, and said quietly here, "It's not much, but it's warm. Please have it. It's on the house." The elderly woman's eyes widened. "Oh, no, young man, we couldn't. That's yours. You need to eat, too." Marcus shook his head, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Please take it. I insist." The man and woman exchanged a look, and finally, with trembling hands, they accepted the plate. They sat in one of the booths, and Marcus poured them 2 glasses of water. He didn't charge them a cent. As they ate slowly, savoring every bite, Marcus stood behind the counter, watching silently. His stomach growled painfully, but in his heart, he felt strangely full. The way the woman closed her eyes after each bite of warm food, the way the man's shoulders relaxed as if a heavy burden had lifted. It was worth it. The woman wiped a tear from her eye and whispered, "Young man, may God bless you. You've given us more than food tonight. You've given us kindness." Marcus just nodded, not trusting his voice. He busied himself wiping down tables, but inside, her words echoed like a song. When they finished, the couple thanked him again and again. The man shook his hand with surprising strength and said, "You may not realize this, son, but you've done something special tonight. We won't forget you." They left slowly, disappearing into the cold night. Marcus stood at the door for a moment, watching them walk down the street hand in hand, their shadows stretching under the streetlights. Then he returned to the empty diner. His plate was gone, his stomach still empty, but he didn't regret it. Instead, he whispered to himself, "At least they won't sleep hungry tonight." The clock ticked past midnight as Marcus cleaned up the last of the dishes. His body was weak, but his spirit felt lighter. He didn't know it yet, but that small act of sacrifice, the choice to give away the only meal he had, was about to set into motion a chain of events far greater than anything he could have imagined. That night, as Marcus locked the diner doors and stepped into cold, he thought about his life. He lived in a small one-room apartment, barely made enough to cover rent, and often skipped meals so he could send money to his younger sister in college. He worked harder than most people, yet life seemed to keep him in the same place. But still, he never let bitterness consume him. He believed in kindness, even if it didn't always pay the bills. His stomach growled again as he walked home, but this time he smiled through the hunger. Some things, he whispered to himself, are worth more than a full stomach. And with that, he disappeared into the night, unaware that destiny was already working behind the scenes, preparing a miracle that would knock on his door the very next day. The night air was cold as Marcus walked out of the diner, pulling his thin jacket tighter around his body. The streets were mostly empty, lit only by the occasional flickering streetlight. A few cars passed by, their headlights washing over him. But for the most part, it was just Marcus and the sound of his own footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. His stomach growled again, louder this time. He placed a hand over it, half laughing to himself. "Easy, I'll feed you tomorrow," he whispered, though he knew there was little waiting for him at home. Marcus lived in a tiny one-room apartment above an old laundromat. The rent was cheap, and so was the building. Paint peeling from the walls, pipes groaning in the winter, and neighbors were either too busy working or too tired to say hello. But for Marcus, it was still a blessing. At least it was his. At least it was shelter. As he climbed the creaky staircase and unlocked his door, he flicked on the single dim bulb that lit the room. The apartment was bare, a mattress on the floor, a small table with one chair, and a worn-out dresser where he kept his few clothes. On the table sat a framed photograph of his family. His mother, smiling even though her hands were calloused from years of hard work, and his younger sister, Alicia, grinning wide in her high school graduation cap. That picture was Marcus's anchor. It reminded him why he worked so hard. He set his bag down, kicked off his shoes, and sat on the edge of the mattress. The hunger inside him was sharp now, but he pushed it aside. He thought instead about the elderly couple he had fed, the way the woman closed her eyes after her first bite, as if tasting not just food but comfort, the way the man gripped his hand and promised they wouldn't forget him. "Maybe that's enough," Marcus murmured. "Maybe making someone's night better is worth going hungry." But as the silence of his small apartment pressed in, memories began to surface. He thought about his childhood, how often his mother had sacrificed her own meals so that he and Alicia could eat. He remembered the nights when she pretended to already be full, sipping only tea, while he and his sister split the last piece of bread. Back then, Marcus had promised himself he'd never let his family struggle again. Yet here he was, still living on the edge of poverty, still going to bed with an empty stomach. He lay down on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. The hum of the laundromat machines below filled the air, steady and dull. His body begged for sleep, but his mind refused a rest. He thought about rent, which was due in a week. He thought about Alicia, who had just started college in another state. She was studying hard to become a nurse, and Marcus sent her every extra dollar he could. Sometimes that meant skipping meals. Sometimes it meant working double shifts. But he never complained. To him, Alicia's future mattered more than his present comfort. She was the first in their family to attend college, and Marcus wanted nothing to stop her. Still, there were nights like this one when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Dad, I hope I'm doing enough." His father had passed away when Marcus was just a boy, leaving behind a family that had to struggle for every bit of stability. His mother carried the burden, and now Marcus carried it too. The hunger gnawed at him, but what hurt more was the fear. Fear that life would never change, that no matter how hard he worked, he'd always be the man cleaning tables while others enjoyed full plates. Minutes turned into hours as he tossed and turned. At one point, he stood up and opened the fridge. Inside, there was only a half-empty jug of milk and a couple of apples, both bruised. He picked one up, turned it over in his hand, then put it back. Save it for tomorrow, he told himself. Back on the mattress, he pulled the blanket up to his chest. The blanket was thin, barely enough to keep out the cold. He curled into himself and tried to think of better days. He thought of the times he and Alicia would laugh together over silly jokes, or how his mother used to sing while cooking, filling their tiny kitchen with warmth. Those memories became his comfort when the hunger and loneliness pressed too hard. At last, sleep began to pull at him, but before he drifted off, Marcus whispered into the darkness, "At least they won't go to bed hungry tonight." He was talking about the elderly couple, of course. And in that single thought, he found peace. What Marcus didn't know, lying there in his cramped apartment, was that his act of kindness had already begun to ripple outward. The couple he had fed wasn't just grateful, they were deeply moved. They would not forget him. And tomorrow, someone would come looking for Marcus, someone who would turn his life upside down. But for now, all Marcus knew was hunger, exhaustion, and the quiet satisfaction of doing the right thing. His stomach might have been empty, but his heart was full. And sometimes, that's enough to survive the night. The morning sun crept through the blinds of Marcus's tiny apartment, waking him from a restless sleep. His stomach was still empty, but he didn't have the luxury of lying in bed. He had another long day ahead at the diner. He got up, splashed cold water on his face, and put on his freshly ironed uniform. Marcus always made sure he looked presentable, even if his life felt like it was falling apart. It was his way of holding on to dignity. By 7 a.m., he was back at the diner, wiping tables, setting out coffee mugs, and preparing for breakfast rush. The place smelled of fresh bacon and brewing coffee, the kind of scent that usually made Marcus's mouth water. But today, he pushed the hunger aside and focused on his work. Around 8:30, the bell above the door jingled. Marcus looked up and froze. A tall man in a tailored navy blue suit stepped inside. His shoes shined, his tie was perfectly knotted, and a gold watch gleamed on his wrist. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being respected everywhere he went. Marcus walked over with a polite smile. "Good morning, sir. Table for one?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied Marcus carefully, almost as if trying to read his soul. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, a table for one." Marcus led him to a booth by the window, handed him a menu, and said, "I'll be right back with water and coffee." As Marcus poured the coffee, the man spoke up. "Tell me, are you the young man who gave his meal away last night?" Marcus froze, the pot of coffee trembling slightly in his hand. I beg your pardon?" The man leaned forward. "My parents came in late last night, an elderly couple. They told me everything, about how you gave them your plate of food when you hadn't eaten all day." Marcus set the coffee pot down slowly, unsure how to respond. "Yes, sir. They looked hungry. It wasn't much, but I couldn't let them go without something to eat." The man's stern expression softened into a smile. "My name is Richard Bennett. My parents are the ones you helped, and they insisted I come meet you." Marcus blinked in shock. "Your parents? Oh, I didn't know." Richard nodded. "They told me they've never experienced such kindness from a stranger. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything in return. You just gave." Marcus felt his cheeks warm. "Honestly, sir, it was nothing. I've been hungry before. I know what it feels like." Richard studied him in silence for a moment. "Nothing," he repeated. "My parents said it was everything. They told me. That young man gave us hope. Do you know how rare that is?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Compliments made him nervous. He wasn't used to being praised. He was just used to working hard, keeping his head down, and surviving. Richard took a sip of his coffee, then leaned back. "I want to know more about you, Marcus. Where you're from. What drives a young man like you to show that level of compassion when you have so little yourself?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't in the habit of sharing his personal struggles with strangers, especially not well-dressed men who looked like they had everything in life. But there was something in Richard's voice, Genuine curiosity, not pity, that made him open up. He told Richard about growing up without a father, about his mother's sacrifices, about how he worked long shifts to pay rent and send money to his sister in college. He explained how he often skipped meals just to stretch his paycheck, and how kindness was something his mother had drilled into him. As Marcus spoke, Richard listened intently, never interrupting. When Marcus finished, Richard nodded slowly. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," he said. "Except I had someone who gave me a chance when I needed it most. That chance changed my life. And now, maybe it's my turn to do the same for you." Marcus blinked. I don't understand." Richard leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "I'm not just a man in a suit, Marcus. I own several restaurants and hotels across the state. I know what it takes to build something from the ground up. But more importantly, I know that character matters more than skill. And you, young man, have character in abundance." Marcus's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," Richard interrupted gently, "that I'd like to offer you an opportunity. Not here, not waiting tables. Something bigger. A management training program under my company. I believe you're the kind of person who deserves more than just scraping by. You have the heart of a leader." For a moment, Marcus could only stare at him, stunned. His brain struggled to process what was happening. Yesterday, he had been giving away his only meal. Today, a millionaire was offering him a future. "Sir, I don't have a degree. I've never studied business. I'm just a waiter," Marcus stammered. Richard smiled knowingly. "Skills can be taught. Degrees can be earned. But integrity? Compassion? Those cannot be taught. You already have them. That makes you rare, Marcus. Very rare." Marcus swallowed hard. His heart pounded in his chest. He thought of his mother, of his sister, of the years of struggle. Could this really be happening? Could one act of kindness truly open a door to a different life? Richard reached across the table and extended his hand. "What do you say? Will you let me help you build a future worthy of your heart?" Marcus stared at the hand, his throat tight with emotion. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he shook it. "Yes, sir," he whispered. "Yes, I'll work hard. I won't let you down." Richard's grip was firm, reassuring. "I know you won't. My parents saw something in you. And now, so do I." At that moment, Marcus realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. The road ahead would be difficult, yes. But for the first time in years, he felt hope burning inside him like a flame. And all of it began with one plate of food. The diner was beginning to fill up with the morning crowd, but Marcus barely noticed. His hands trembled slightly as he refilled coffee cups and cleared plates, still replaying Richard's words in his mind. A management training program under his company? A chance to change my life? It sounded like something out of a dream, and Marcus wasn't sure if he could believe it. He had spent years struggling just to keep the lights on, and now a millionaire was sitting at one of his booths, offering him a future. It felt unreal, like life was playing a trick on him. When the rush died down, Richard motioned for Marcus to sit. At first, Marcus hesitated. He wasn't used to sitting with customers. But Richard's expression was warm, almost fatherly, and finally Marcus slid into booth across from him. "Listen," Richard began, resting his hands on the table. "I didn't come here today just to thank you. My parents insisted I meet you, yes, but I also came here with a purpose. Men like you, men with character and heart, are the kind of people I want in my company." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "But, sir, I've never been in business. I don't even know where to start. I've only ever worked as a waiter." Richard smiled patiently. "That's where you're wrong. You already have skills that many so-called professionals don't. You know how to handle people. You know how to stay calm under pressure. You understand hard work and sacrifice. And most importantly, you know what it means to lead with kindness. Those are qualities no textbook can teach." Marcus lowered his gaze. "But I didn't finish college. I couldn't afford it." Richard's voice softened. "Neither did I, Marcus. At least, not at first. Do you know how I built my first restaurant? By washing dishes and watching how the managers ran the place. By learning from the ground up. Hard work and integrity were my degrees. The rest came later." Marcus looked up, his eyes wide. You mean you started just like me? Exactly like you, Richard replied firmly. That's why I see myself in you. And that's why I'm willing to take a chance on you. For the first time, Marcus allowed himself to imagine it. What if he could really do more with his life? What if he could break free from the cycle of survival and finally build something lasting? He pictured his sister graduating without worrying about money, his mother living in comfort instead of struggling every month. For a moment, the vision felt so real that tears pricked at his eyes. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek business card, sliding across the table. Here's my direct number. Call me tomorrow, and we'll set up a meeting at my office. I'll enroll you in our management training program. It won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than you ever have. But if you stick with it, I promise you, your life will change. Marcus picked up the card carefully, as if it were made of glass. He read the name, Richard Bennett, CEO, Bennett Hospitality Group. His hand trembled as he held it. Sir, Marcus's voice cracked. Why me? You could choose anyone. You could hire college graduates, people with experience. Why waste your time on me? Richard leaned forward, his eyes steady. Because those people have resumes. You have character. When my parents told me how you gave up your only meal for them, I realized you're the kind of man I want representing my company. Kindness, humility, selflessness. That's leadership, Marcus. The rest I can teach you. Marcus swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. No one had ever believed in him like this before. For so long, he had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. And now, a man of Richard's stature was looking at him as if he were someone important, someone capable of greatness. Finally, Marcus found his voice. If you give me this chance, sir, I won't let you down. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll prove myself. Richard smiled and extended his hand once again. I know you will. My parents already see you as family, Marcus. And now I do too. Welcome to a new chapter of your life. Marcus shook his hand, his grip firm despite the emotion swirling inside him. For the first time in years, he felt hope burning like fire in his chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Marcus continued his shift, but his mind kept drifting to the business card in his pocket. Each time he touched it, a wave of disbelief washed over him. Could one simple act of kindness truly have led to this moment? When his shift ended, Marcus walked home under the setting sun. The streets looked the same, his apartment was still the same cramped space, but something inside him had shifted. He no longer saw himself as just a waiter. He was a man standing on the edge of opportunity. That night, he placed a business card on the small table beside his family photograph. He stared at the picture of his mother and sister, whispering, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the break we've been waiting for. As he lay down on his mattress, the hunger in his stomach no longer felt unbearable. Hope had filled the emptiness. And with that hope came determination. No matter how hard the road ahead, Marcus was ready to walk it. He closed his eyes with a quiet smile, whispering the words that carried him through so many hard nights. You never lose when you give. This time, though, those words felt more powerful than ever, because now, for the first time in his life, he was starting to believe that giving could lead to receiving something greater. And tomorrow, his journey into a brand new world would begin. The next few weeks moved faster than Marcus could have ever imagined. One day, he was carrying plates and scrubbing tables at the diner. The next, he was walking into a glass-walled office building downtown, clutching a folder with his name on it. The sign above the entrance read Bennett Hospitality Group, gleaming in the sunlight. Marcus paused for a moment, staring up at it. His palms were sweaty, his heart was pounding, but his steps felt steady. He wasn't just a waiter anymore. He was stepping into a new world. Inside, everything was polished and professional. Men and women in crisp suits walked past, carrying laptops and talking into headsets. Marcus felt out of place in his second-hand dress shirt, but he reminded himself of Richard's words. Skills can be taught. Character cannot. Richard greeted him personally that first day. Marcus, he said warmly, clapping him on the shoulder. I'm glad you came. Welcome to your new beginning. From there, Marcus dove headfirst into the management training program. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was harder than anything he had ever done. He had to learn about budgets, supply chains, customer service policies, and staff management. There were late nights spent studying manuals and early mornings attending seminars. But Marcus never complained. He worked twice as hard as anyone else in the program, driven by the hunger to prove himself worthy of the opportunity. Whenever he doubted his abilities, he thought of his mother's tired smile, his sister's dreams, and the elderly couple who had unknowingly changed his life. The first few months were a whirlwind. Marcus learned to manage restaurant staff, handle customer complaints, and oversee inventory. At first, he stumbled. He forgot figures, made small mistakes, and sometimes second-guessed himself. But Richard never scolded him. Instead, he guided him patiently. "Every mistake," Richard said, "is just a stepping stone to growth. Don't fear them. Learn from them." Slowly, Marcus's confidence grew. He discovered he had a natural ability to connect with people. The staff respected him, not because he was in charge, but because he listened to them, treated them fairly, and remembered their struggles. He had walked in their shoes. After all, he knew what it was like to work long hours on your feet, to wonder how you'd pay rent at the end of the month. One evening, while closing up one of the restaurants he was assigned to, Marcus looked around the dining room. The tables gleamed, the chairs were neatly tucked in, and the scent of fresh bread lingered in the air. For the first time, he felt like he belonged in this world, not as a server, but as a leader. Months turned into a year. By then, Marcus was no longer in training. He had been promoted to assistant manager at one of Richard's most successful restaurants. His mother had moved out of her cramped apartment into a comfortable house Richard helped him finance. His sister, Alicia, no longer worried about tuition. Marcus paid it proudly, smiling every time she called to thank him. But what meant the most wasn't the paycheck or the title. It was a respect he had earned. Staff members came to him for advice. Customers remembered his kindness. And Richard often introduced him as one of my finest managers and one of the kindest men I know. One evening, the elderly couple, Richard's parents, visited the restaurant. They walked in slowly, just as they had that night at the diner. But this time, Marcus wasn't handing them his meal. He was welcoming them into a restaurant he helped run. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. He greeted warmly, pulling out a chair for them. "It's an honor to have you here." The elderly woman smiled, her eyes glistening. "Look at you, Marcus. We knew you were special the night you gave us your food. And now look how far you've come." Her husband clasped Marcus's hand firmly. "You're living proof that kindness comes back around." Marcus swallowed hard, emotion rising in his chest. "I only did what I thought was right," he said quietly. The old man smiled. "And that, son, is why you're standing here today." As they dined, Richard joined them, watching Marcus interact with staff and customers. He leaned toward his parents and whispered, "This is why I trust him. He leads with heart." Later that night, after closing, Marcus stood outside under the stars. He thought back to that cold evening in the diner, the hunger in his stomach, the plate of food he gave away. At the time, it felt like such a small act, almost insignificant, but it had changed everything. He realized something profound. True wealth isn't measured in money or titles. It's measured in the lives you touch when you choose kindness. That thought stayed with him as he continued to rise in the company. Years later, Marcus became a regional manager, overseeing multiple restaurants. His story spread, inspiring not only his co-workers, but also countless young people who thought their circumstances defined them. Whenever someone asked him how he got a start, Marcus always smiled and said, "It all began with one plate of food. I gave it away, and life gave me back something greater." And every time he said it, he meant it, because Marcus knew deep in his heart that the greatest victories are born from the simplest sacrifices.